Hey guys, welcome to another one of my OBS tutorials. So today we'll be going through how to actually use NDI properly. Now, I have found a lot of tutorials on YouTube focus on using two copies of OBS. So you have OBS running on your gaming PC and OBS running on your streaming PC, which is a separate computer. Now, a lot of these tutorials imply using an OBS plugin, which I'll link to in the description below, and installing this plugin on both machines running OBS. This isn't the best way to go about doing this, and it can actually result in a lot of complications in terms of having OBS running on your gaming PC and actually utilizing more resources than you actually need it to use. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to go through is three things. One, setting up OBS's NDI plugin on your streaming PC. I'm also going to go through how to do it on your gaming PC as well, because I will go into how to send audio sources over NDI. I'll also go through installing the NDI tools program, which allows you to actually beam your desktop over your network to your streaming PC with near minimal latency. And thirdly, how does this actually work? So to start off, I'm going to just quickly explain NDI. So NDI is a codec created by a company called NewTek. Now, what this allows people to do is stream up to approximately 4 1080p 60 FPS streams over a gigabit connection to a capture device or a capture PC, which can then output it. So say, for instance, I had 4 webcams and they were all 1080p and they were all hooked up to essentially a device that could capture the webcam and output over NDI. I can then send those 4 webcam streams to one system over a gigabit network with very minimal latency. So if I wanted 4 views of myself right now, it would be incredibly easy to set up. So why would you want NDI? Well, capture cards are inherently expensive. And they do have limitations. So in my circumstances, I run my streams with ultra-wide games. So my games are actually running at 3440 by 1440. Now, the problem with trying to send a 3440 by 1440 video in OBS is that it's actually trying to render my game at 1340 by 1440 inside of a 1080p, essentially, little template. So you're essentially rendering huge amounts of video and utilizing way too much GPU for rendering a scene and compositing a scene than you really need to. In this case, this is where a streaming PC really comes into play. And this is where a lot of people do find that capture cards in streaming PCs are incredibly useful. Now, don't get me wrong, capture cards are incredibly useful when it comes to capturing consoles. That would be the only real reason at this point that I would ever recommend getting a capture card, unless you would only running a single PC setup, which is inherently has its issues anyway if you're running very high quality games or you don't have a powerful CPU and GPU. What I would generally recommend is if you want to output ultra wide or anything higher than 1080p, you do need at least a 6-core CPU and at least a 1080 or above, because this will also cause issues with OBS. A lot of people do not realize that OBS is actually compositing the scene you make on your GPU using 3D resources. So it's not using NVENC, it is using your GPU's 3D rendering. And games use that. So if you've got a really complex scene using a lot of browser sources, your webcam, and some moving text, you're actually utilizing far more resources than you really need to do on your gaming PC, which affects your frame rate, which affects OBS. So in turn, what this tutorial is going to show you, if you do have a secondary PC, which you can essentially plug in a low-end GPU, such as a 1050 Ti, which would be about where I would limit it. You shouldn't need to go any higher than this. If you do have something higher laying around, go for it. Now, this does rely on you at least having 4 cores on your streaming PC, and at least I would recommend 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM. My setup is as follows. So I have my gaming PC, which is a Core i7 6700. It is not overclocked. It's running at 3.4 gigahertz, and it's more than ample for playing a game. I've got 32 gig of RAM in this build, and I also have a 1070. Perfect. So this PC is incredibly capable of running games at 60 FPS and higher. at an ultra wide resolution with certain settings, obviously. Now, here's where things get really interesting. So behind me there, where you see that monitor, is a server. Now, this server is capable of running virtual machines on it. So what I've created is a 6-core VM with a 1050 Ti pass through to it. Now, this VM has its own dedicated gigabit Ethernet connection. So there's 2 Ethernet controllers on that server. One that's utilized for the server resources for the NAS, and the other one is directly for the VM. So what does this mean? This means that I can quite literally capture my desktop in its full 3440 by 1440, push that over a gigabit network to that machine, and there's no stutter, there's no delay, there's no anything wrong. It is a perfect stream. Let's get into how we get this set up and how you can do this yourself. Now, as you can see here, I currently have OBS running on my gaming PC. Just to give you an idea of how resources are being used right now on this computer, this is Task Manager. If we go in here, we can see that OBS is currently using 20% of my 1070 to decode the video that I'm currently recording. That's not using 3D resources. That's not using the GPU to quite literally render the scene. Where you start to get that is when you have really complex scenes that need to be composited. So this scene here is quite literally my webcam and my desktop. So there's not a lot to really render here or compose. It's when you start going into really high-end scenes, like my game scene, which should render completely in a second, that you should see that the CPU usage has crept up. It's starting to use a bit more GPU than it did. And if we actually come into performance and GPU, we should start to see a little bit of 3D usage. So I've got about 10% 3D usage on my GPU right now. How can we improve this and give your games more resources to use for itself? What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring up my virtual machine. I'll just move all this out of the way. So this is my virtual machine. Now we're going to load up ODS Studio. Take into account that my setup is a little bit different to what yours may be. So I actually have my webcam and my Stream Deck directly plugged in and passed through to this virtual machine. So you'll notice in the scenes that do have webcams that there is actually no webcam right now. What you do see in here, however, right now is a stream of this computer. And you'll notice as I move the window around and take into account a bit of recording lag, there's only about 0.5 milliseconds of latency. There's barely any latency. It's quite smooth. Now, when you're playing a game, you may notice a little bit more lag, but this is generally as good as it's going to get. How do we do this? How do we get this kind of performance really easily? Well, it's simple. Now, I'm going to link to these in the description below. So the first thing you're going to need to get is the NewTek NDI tools. This does allow you to do this on Windows or Mac. So if you, say for instance, in my case, if I want to just chill on my bed and do an IRL stream, I can quite literally just use my load up my OBS on there, simply pass through everything that I need to over NDI to my streaming desktop, and there's near no delay. So if I want to switch from this computer right here and go into my bedroom, I can just pass through everything over NDI to my streaming machine, and there's absolutely no issues whatsoever. My stream doesn't have to cut out. I don't have to close anything. I don't have to open anything. I can quite literally just send it all over. And this is the great thing about NDI. The first thing you're going to do is download and install the NDI tools for Windows. The second thing you're going to need to do is to grab the OBS NDI plugin. I do recommend installing this on your gaming machine and also your streaming PC. The link that I'll give you below in the description, you'll need to come to this page and go to releases. Now, when you're in releases, what you're going to find is a few files. The one you are going to grab is the windows-installer.exe file. Now, for Mac, you're going to want to grab the PKG file. Please be aware, this is not a perfect solution for capturing in OBS. I generally would recommend not using this to capture from your gaming PC to your streaming PC. However, it is good to have it installed anyway, as I will go through how to pass through audio sources over NDI to your streaming PC as well. Grab that, install it. Generally follow the instructions below. They may change as this has just updated and I haven't tested this latest version yet. However, it does include a lot of fixes that I would highly recommend upgrading to if you do already have this. I'll be doing this myself. We have NDI tools and everything installed. What do we do next? What we are going to do is quite simple. What we're going to do is we're going to come down here, and depending on if you have your setup here to display everything, you're going to hit here, and you should find this little icon here, which when you hover over it, will say NewTek NDI Scan Converter. In order to get this, all you need to do is go to your Start menu, no, Scan Converter. Search for Scan Converter. Now, when you open this up, you will get the icon, and what you're going to do is this. Now, there's a few options here. What I generally do myself is I simply select desktop so that anything that comes up on my screen is captured. So if I load up a full screen game or a windowed game, it's just going to pop up right on the screen here. You can select an individual application. So say for instance, you don't want to stream with desktop, but you do, however, want to stream the game that you've just opened. What you would do is you would right click on the icon down here, and you would quite literally select the app that you wanted to send over NDI. Now this would generally be your game. It can also be a program that you might want to send over NDI to your streaming PC. Say you're doing a creative stream, it might be Photoshop or something similar. So this is how you do it. You would quite literally select your program from the list here. In this case, will be selecting desktop, which is already ticked. And on your streaming PC, what we're going to do is I'm going to guide you through how to actually do this. How do we get my screen on this? Easy. We come here. So we create a scene. If you already have a scene, just go into that scene. Now, in this list, with the NDI plugin installed, you should see an NDI source option. So when you click on that, what you can do is, say, name this desktop capture. Now, what you're going to see in here is options. Now, in this case, I'm going to select the name of whatever you've selected here. So I'm going to click Allow Hardware Acceleration, leave Bandwidth at highest, and Sync at internal, and go OK. And in a moment, look at that. We have my desktop being streamed over my gigabit network with near minimal latency. That's pretty damn cool. Alright, but what if we load up a game? That's where it gets really interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to insert a part of my VOD from my latest Twitch stream where I am utilizing this on a daily basis to stream games. Now, the example that I'm going to use is Call of Duty World War II, which is a rather graphically intensive game. I used OBS game capture to previously grab the game and use that in OBS and then just send it directly out to Twitch without a streaming PC. What I encountered was an incredible amount of stutter. Now, this stutter was not caused by the game. The game was running perfectly fine. But I did notice that there was a point where OBS was literally trying to compose the scene and render it, and it was actually failing to do so properly. Now, that's a problem, because when you are outputting to your viewers, you don't want the game to stutter, you don't want anything to stutter. And when this was stuttering, my webcam was stuttering, my scrolling text was stuttering, everything in my scene was stuttering, and this was horrible. But with this new way of using NDI, you will find everything is a lot crisper, cleaner, and easier. That is how you get NDI up and running for capture. But what if you really like using your mic, webcam, your headset on your gaming PC, and you don't want to have them plugged into your streaming PC? This is really simple. So you'll see here that I've got audio sources. So I have my headset and my microphone, my Blue Yeti. And what I've actually done is I've clicked on the cog, I've come to filters, and what I've added in the audio filters is a dedicated NDI output for audio only. In order to do this, you simply hit plus and then go dedicated NDI output audio only. Now, if I change this to, now what is this? This is my microphone. So I'm going to call this source microphone. So this is how NDI is going to pick this up. So when I come back to my streaming PC and I go add, and I go NDI source, and I go mic, I can then go OK. And what I'll see in here is a listing for microphone. And I'm going to set that bandwidth to audio only, and we'll keep the sync at internal, and we'll go OK. And as you'll see on my streaming PC right now, it is quite literally grabbing my audio over the network. How cool is that? So you can do that for every single source that you have. Say you have 3 sources, maybe you've got a dedicated music source. You can quite literally pump them all over to your streaming PC with near minimal latency latency So in the end, you only end up with the amount of latency for your video. So say, for instance, I was pumping my webcam over NDI. And let's do that right now. Effects filter, sorry. Dedicated NDI output, and I'm going to go webcam. Now I'm going to call this one webcam. I'm going to apply changes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my streaming PC. I'm going to go add NDI source webcam. I'm going to go OK. And in here, I'm going to be able to select webcam. I'm going to allow hardware acceleration and go OK. And in a moment, we're going to see my webcam pop up. Now, be aware that I am running this over an RDP connection, so there is a tiny little bit of latency. But as you'll see, based on the webcam in the corner and the webcam here, the delay is quite minimal. At least 0.5 to 1 milliseconds, at least in my testing. So, that's how you can pass through your webcam, your microphone, your desktop audio, and your screen over your gigabit network to your streaming PC. Now, what kind of resources does this use on your computer? 6.8% CPU, 81.1 megabytes. It's using nearly 30 megabit per second of my network, depending on what I'm doing at any given time. So if I move around and send a bit more data, you'll probably see it spike up. If I move Task Manager around, you'll probably see that spike again. But it's using no GPU whatsoever. Guess what's using the GPU? OBS. And guess what? It's using a lot less resources than it was using before. In conclusion, what does this mean to you? Well, if you do have a spare PC running around with at least 4 cores, not 2 cores and 2 threads, 4 physical cores, and at least 8 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 1050 Ti or higher, and you can use something like a 980 or equivalent if you do have an older generation, that I'm just using the 1050 Ti as a current example of what you can use for a really cheap price, because 1050 Ti's, despite the cryptocurrency increase, are actually still very competitively priced cards. If you don't have that around, well, what options do you have? You have a few options. Do you have a laptop? Does your laptop have at least 4 physical cores? And does your laptop have a dedicated GPU? If it does, awesome. Does it have an Intel processor with QuickSync? Awesome. Congratulations, you have yourself a streaming PC. So this is the great thing about NDI. You can have a really low power machine, like a laptop, and as long as it has a gigabit capable Ethernet port, 4 cores, 4 physical cores, and it has possibly Intel QuickSync, which you can find by searching the processor, the actual processor on your laptop, and going to Intel's spec sheet and finding the QuickSync option. If you have that, what you can do is actually use Intel's QuickSync encoder in OBS, which you will find how to do below in the description in a previous video, and actually get a really high quality stream using minimal resources. Even if you have a Mac, you can do this. So if you have a Mac with 4 physical cores, dedicated GPU, an Intel CPU, you can do the exact same thing as that. And a lot of people have Macs. It makes perfect sense. If you're not using your Mac anymore, turn it into a streaming PC. Install Windows on it. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you absolutely loved it, please subscribe so that I can make more of these tutorials. And if you do have any suggestions for more content in the future, chuck them in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.